The night was silent, yet heavy with an unspoken sorrow, and in that stillness, a cry rose from the shadows. Not the loud bark of a dog, not the gentle meow of a cat, but the soft whimper of tiny lives desperate to be heard. They were small, fragile, trembling under the cold wind, their tiny eyes searching for a mother who was no longer there. 4 little cubs, no bigger than the palm of a hand, clung to one another, unaware of the cruel world that had left them behind. They were alone, helpless, and fading with every passing hour. But destiny has a way of writing miracles when everything seems lost. Just beyond the broken fence of an abandoned yard stood a German shepherd, strong, alert, and graceful. Her amber eyes glowed in the dim light, as if they carried a wisdom far greater than her years. She was no ordinary dog. She had known struggle, had fought battles, and had carried scars both visible and invisible. Yet, within her heart was something rare and pure, a love that could heal. The shepherd moved closer, her steps careful, almost hesitant, as though she understood the weight of what lay before her. The tiny cubs shivered, their cries piercing the silence, and in that moment, something powerful awakened in her. She lowered her head, sniffed them gently, and with a soft nudge, she seemed to say, "You are not alone anymore." It was as if nature itself had chosen her, a guardian from another kind, to rise as the mother they so desperately needed. And so, under the quiet sky, an extraordinary story began. A story of loss, survival, and the unbreakable bond between the most unlikely of families. The beginning of the cub's life was painted in struggle. Their real mother, a frail street cat, had fought hard to keep them alive. She scavenged scraps from trash bins, curled her body tightly around them on freezing nights, and purred softly to calm their tiny hearts. But her own strength was fading, worn down by hunger and sickness. One morning, she didn't return to the nest she had made under a pile of old wood. Her little ones waited, mewling endlessly, but the sound of her paws never came again. The world had suddenly turned cold and unkind. Days passed, and the cubs grew weaker. Their tiny bellies remained empty, their cries grew softer, and their strength began to slip away. Without warmth and nourishment, their chances of survival were almost none. It was heartbreaking to see such innocent creatures abandoned, not by choice, but by the cruel twist of life. Each moment felt like a race against time, and the clock was running out. Then came the German shepherd. She lived not far from where the kittens lay, often seen patrolling the yard she called home. To her human family, she was loyal and protective. But when her sharp ears caught the faint meows, something stirred deep inside her. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was empathy, or perhaps it was the memory of the puppies she once lost herself. Whatever it was, it pulled her toward the helpless cubs. She found them huddled together, barely moving, their tiny bodies shaking with fear and cold. The shepherd sniffed them again and again, circling as if weighing the decision before her. These were not her kind. Yet, when one cub raised its tiny paw and reached for her fur, something inside her broke. She lay down gently beside them, allowing their fragile forms to press against her warmth. In that moment, their struggle found its first glimmer of hope. The rescue did not happen all at once. It unfolded like a delicate dance, each step filled with uncertainty, yet driven by love. The German shepherd returned again and again to the place where the cubs lay. At first, she brought only her warmth, curling her large body around their tiny frames, letting them rest against her chest, where they could hear her heartbeat. That sound, steady and strong, replaced the silence of the mother they had lost. It was the first time in days they felt safe enough to close their eyes. But warmth was not enough. Their small bellies still ached, and their cries for food pierced the air. The shepherd, restless and anxious, paced back to her own yard, whining at her human's door. She barked and scratched, not with aggression, but with urgency, as though trying to tell them, "Follow me, something needs us." Her family, puzzled at first, finally gave in to her persistence. She led them straight to the abandoned corner where the kittens lay. The sight broke their hearts, the fragile little cubs, ribs showing, eyes half closed from exhaustion. Without hesitation, they scooped them up and carried them gently inside. The shepherd hovered protectively, refusing to let them out of her sight. As the humans prepared milk in a tiny bottle, she nosed each cub, licking their heads as if reassuring them that help had arrived. One by one, the kittens drank, their tiny mouths latching onto the nipple, their weak bodies suddenly fueled with life. The shepherd watched closely, her ears twitching at every sound, her eyes filled with a tenderness that could rival any mother's love. In that small home, the rescue was not just of kittens. It was the rescue of trust, the rebirth of hope, and the start of an unbreakable bond between a dog who refused to walk away and the cubs who needed her most. Days turned into weeks, and what once looked like the end of 4 fragile lives slowly began to change. The kittens, once too weak to even lift their heads, now purred softly as they nestled into the thick fur of their unlikely mother. The German shepherd guarded them with unwavering devotion, lying beside them through the nights, licking their tiny ears and nudging them awake when it was time to eat. To her, they were no different from her own blood. She had chosen them, and in return, they had chosen her. Their fur grew shinier, their eyes brighter, and their cries stronger. The house that had once echoed with silence now came alive with playful meows, soft purrs, and the shepherd's watchful footsteps. When the kittens began to wobble on unsteady legs, it was the shepherd who guided them. She walked slowly ahead, turning back often, waiting patiently as they stumbled after her. Sometimes she would nudge them gently forward with her nose, as if whispering, "You can do this." The transformation was not just physical, it was emotional. The cubs, who once knew only fear and hunger, now learned what it meant to be loved. They no longer flinched at shadows or shivered in the cold. Instead, they curled into the warmth of their shepherd, their tiny paws resting on her massive chest, their purrs blending with the sound of her steady breath. She was their world, their protector, their mother. Even the humans marveled at the sight. A dog and kittens, 2 worlds apart, now bound together by something greater than blood, by compassion, by loyalty, by the purest form of love. The kittens had not only survived, they were thriving, and it was all because one German shepherd refused to let them die alone. As the months passed, the bond between the German shepherd and her adopted cubs blossomed into something truly extraordinary. What began as fragile survival turned into a beautiful rhythm of life. The kittens, now playful and curious, darted around the house with bursts of energy, chasing after strings, climbing small shelves, and occasionally tumbling into mischief. And every time they wandered too far, the shepherd was there, her sharp eyes never leaving them. With a gentle bark or a swift nudge of her nose, she would herd them back, just as she once might have done with her own puppies. Neighbors who visited the home were left in awe at the sight. A powerful dog lying on the floor, 4 tiny kittens crawling over her back, tugging at her tail, even playfully batting at her ears. And instead of annoyance, she responded with patience and love. She tolerated their games, allowing them to climb over her, as though she were a mountain built just for their joy. When they grew tired and curled up in a pile of fur, she would wrap her body protectively around them, her head resting over their small frames, her eyes closing in contentment. It was a family that no one expected but everyone admired. The humans often whispered about how incredible it was, how nature had created something so touching, so pure. But to the shepherd and the kittens, it wasn't strange at all. To them, this was simply home. They had lost once, but they had found one another, and that was enough. The story of despair had transformed into a story of love so powerful that it softened even the hardest of hearts. The German shepherd had not only saved their lives, she had given them a reason to live. The story of the German Shepherd and her adopted kittens reminds us of something we often forget in the rush of our daily lives: that love has no boundaries. It does not stop at species. It does not pause at differences, and it does not ask for anything in return. Love, in its purest form, is simply the act of giving without expectation, of protecting without reason, of caring even when the world says you don't have to. Those kittens, once abandoned and hopeless, were given a second chance because one dog chose to open her heart. And the shepherd, who had once carried her own scars of loss, found healing in becoming a mother once again. Together, they built a family that was not defined by blood, but by kindness and loyalty. Their story teaches us that family is not always who we are born to, but who stands by us when we need them most. For us humans, this is a powerful reminder. If a German Shepherd can look at fragile kittens and see not strangers, but children to be loved and protected, then what excuse do we have to turn away from those in need? Compassion costs nothing, yet it can change everything. A single act of kindness can be the difference between despair and hope, between life and death. So the next time you see an animal in need, or even a person struggling silently, remember this story. Remember the dog who became a mother to another kind. Remember that love is bigger than fear, stronger than pain, and more lasting than loss. And maybe, just maybe, let it inspire you to be the reason someone else gets their second chance.